My name is Jim Taylor. I'm from South Africa, and I'm here in Johannesburg at Birchwood to participate in a monitoring of water and communication about water resources workshop, which is over 4 days. It's been organised by WaterNet, and it's a fantastic opportunity for scientists from all 15 SADC countries to get together and work together to improve the way they do water management back in their countries of origin.
My name is Kraspos Kujinga. I'm the programs coordinator for WaterNet.
So the water situation in Southern Africa is really dire. It's really bad. We know that globally, 80% of fresh water is threatened. In SADC, it's much worse than that. As we speak today, we know that our brothers and sisters in Harare, Zimbabwe, are suffering from a cholera outbreak, for example. This should never happen in a modern state, but it is happening. We know that large rivers are no longer running. The second largest river in South Africa, the Vaal River, stopped flowing in its peak flow period this year. Why did that river stop flowing? It was being extracted for irrigation at rates that river can never supply. So our biggest rivers are being disrupted, they're being polluted, the nutrient loading is too much, so we're messing up the most important resource we have. And we need to have workshops like this. We can work together better to solve these kinds of water-related problems.
The training is being sponsored by the British and German governments through the delegated authority of GIZ. This particular training is part of the 19 trainings that WaterNet is running. This particular one is on communicating and monitoring of river water status. It's actually our 16th training that we are holding. We started holding these trainings last year in June, and they are due to end next year in April 2019. And the training brings together participants from SADC countries. We have 13 countries from the SADC region represented, except for Mauritius and Seychelles. So we are happy that most of the countries within the region, they are represented. We have at least 2 representatives from each of the SADC countries. So we have about 30 participants attending this training, and we are glad we partnered with Ground Truth in facilitating this particular training, and we are also happy with the involvement of the Water Research Commission of South Africa.
My name is Dr. Vieros Gillespie. I have a background in aquatic ecology, did a PhD at the University of Cape Town, and I really have a passion for freshwater zoology. That's where my background is from. I'm currently working with Ground Truth, a consulting company based in KwaZulu-Natal, and we're on the interface of working in the research sphere, but also on the ground practical solutions to problems that face water resources in our country and globally. So for this particular workshop, Ground Truth were asked to be the facilitators. So my role in this workshop now is as a main facilitator, presenter of some of the information which we hope to disseminate to the participants that we've got attending. And we're really fortunate and very privileged to be in this position. We're amazed that we have so many countries on board attending, and it's a fantastic opportunity for us to really share knowledge and expertise, and also some of the tools that have been developed within South Africa, and share those with the greater SADC region in a ethos of learning together, participating together, and trying to work towards being excellent stewards of water on our continent. So that's the main kind of aim of the workshop, and we've got a number of topics that we'll be covering over the course of the next 4 days, stemming from the key elements of river monitoring, how to conduct the surveys, what kind of tools or methods might one use, the resources that would need to be available and that one would need to consider, some of the definitions, some of the terms we use. You need to set a good baseline first and get everybody on the same page of understanding. So there's obviously some context that will come through, running through some of the terms, the definitions, and then very importantly, looking at how we report and how we communicate that information back, whether it be to the institutions that we're part of and the greater public, and how we involve the public and all the stakeholders that might be within a catchment. So that's the basic aim of the workshop. We hope that at the end of the 4-day period that people that have come here have made new partnerships, new networks, that they've learned new skills, that they've learned things that might be completely out of their comfort zone and a totally different sphere of work, but that they can go back to their countries and apply some of what they've learned, either in establishing new monitoring programs or change projects, and even just being aware of some of the information, which often, if you're not aware of something, you won't use it. So we hope to make a lot of this information aware. And yes, we're also using a unique model here called the 5T UNESCO system for running a workshop, which the 5 T's, the first one is tuning in. And that's really getting people to think, be on the same page. The second T is then to talk, and that involves dialogue. Then we also have touch, which is one of the last, or the next T, which is really about engaging practically and physically with something. Then we also have taking action as another T within the 5T model. So we're using the UNESCO 5T model as a basis here, and we really feel it has a lot of potential, and hopefully people will walk away having had an amazing experience with all of us here.
The methodologies we're using on the workshop are really interesting. We started off, for example, with a soft landing concept, which is a way of inviting people to meet someone they've never met and work with them to enhance their own work. So, and each person's committed to a change project, which is a project they will do back in their own country to enhance the work they do for water management and for the sustainability of it. We're also linking this work to regional policy, the Regional Strategic Action Plan for Water number 4, so that people are better equipped to meet these objectives, as well as meeting the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are really a global priority. So what we mean by a change project is everybody is doing their best to do their work in their own country, but all of us can do our work better. So the way the change project works is you start off with what you're currently doing, and then what you see at the workshop and the people you meet and the fellow participants, you ask yourself the question, what can I take from this situation to make my work better where I come from, so that people in my country can benefit and water can be managed more sustainably. So one really good example is Bonani Madikizela from the Water Research Commission shared with us a mini SAS pamphlet which is available in English and French. Now we're working with the Portuguese countries of Madagascar, Mozambique and Angola to develop those materials into Portuguese. So that'll strengthen the work there. And those who don't have this resource are getting it from each other, and then they will be able to apply it back in their own countries and add it to their change project.
My name is Estela Bugala. I work with Ministry of Water and Irrigation from Tanzania as a Community Development Officer and also an Assistant National Focal Point for Lake Victoria Basin Commission and Department of Water Resources and Transboundary Section. My expectation for this training is to learn more on the communication and monitoring systems available around the globe and in Africa, to learn from experience from different expertise and from different participants who are gathered here today and for the whole this week, so that I can use that experience in order to also use it in my organization to be able to monitor and communicate with our stakeholders and different stakeholders at ground level and at national level. Thank you.
My name is Jepson Masimba. I work for the Zimbabwe National Water Authority in Zimbabwe. I'm a hydrological technician. My expectations from this workshop is to learn new things from the river and water communicating status from other countries here represented, so that I will implement it back in my own country.
My name is Peter Banda. I'm from Malawi. I'm working as a water resources officer. Yeah, I'm attending this workshop and I've got a number of expectations out of this workshop. First and foremost, I want to see how our colleagues are managing the water resources in their countries, and probably we can also borrow a leaf from them and do the same in our country. At the same time, I also tried to impart the knowledge which we are using in our country, so that which I can also share with my colleagues here in the workshop. It's quite a good workshop because currently what we are facing in most of the African countries, that there's degradation of the catchments, which is quite a big issue in our country as well. So I'd like to see how our country are tackling that one. And in terms of my change objective or change program, it will be mostly be dealt in catchment management, because catchment and water resources management, catchment is a very integral part of the catchment of water resources management. So if we are to monitor our water resources in the country, we are supposed to have intact catchments, and we're supposed to look at our rivers, how they are flowing, how are we gauging in terms of pollution, what are the pollutions, in terms of what my department does, my organization, which is National Water Resources Authority. We're also supposed to monitor the abstraction, to monitor the compliance for those who have been given right to abstract, to monitor the construction of dams where they are being done into standard, so that they don't pose health hazards, at the same time conserving the resource.
Good day, my name is Benson Thompson. I'm from the Kingdom of Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. I work for the Department of Water Affairs as a hydrologist. So part of the work that is done by the Department of Water Affairs is groundwater monitoring, rural water development through schemes, and Water Resources Division, where we have the large-scale infrastructure through dams. We also have water control, which is permitting for farmers to gain access to water from the rivers for irrigation, and also the hydrology section, which is responsible for monitoring of rivers in the country. So basically my work is to collect data from river gauging stations in the country, look at the data for accuracy, and then share the data with stakeholders for water development in the country. I also take part in climate change activities, working with our weather services on projects to mitigate and adapt to climate change, the impact of climate change in the country. Part of my other work is to sit with the countries, our neighboring states, South Africa and Mozambique, in water forums to discuss issues surrounding water quality, water management, and access to water, and highlighting projects which are in the process of being developed. Like currently we are trying to develop 2 dams in the country, so we collaborate and push through that information to our partners, so there's kind of like a buy-in for the region. The expectations from this workshop is basically to know what the other states are doing in terms of water monitoring. What we found is currently in our country we are kind of like behind in terms of the new equipment to monitor rivers, because we only have minimal access to real-time data, and basically we would hope to basically issue out warnings through to stakeholders and neighboring states as a whole, but also just to enhance my change project through what I'm going to learn here, which is for us as a country to have a national water control room, so we are able to basically manage our rivers and know how much water is available at strategic points, and also just to ensure that we continue to issue out water or adhere to our transboundary water agreements with Mozambique and South Africa.
My name is Emmanuel Ferreira. I'm working in the National Water Resource Management in Angola, in the Department of Dam Safety and Hydraulic Structures. So in this workshop, I'm expecting to learn more, to become a better professional, and to share with the others from the SADC for a best or the better monitoring and communicating management of water resource rivers.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, c'est Camille Iyaka Ankao. Je viens de la République démocratique du Congo à Kinshasa. Je travaille au ministère de l'Environnement et Développement durable à la direction des ressources en eau. Je me retrouve ici à Johannesburg pour une formation. La RDC a beaucoup de défis à relever dans le domaine de l'eau. Plusieurs défis à relever, que ce soit dans les eaux océanographiques ou les eaux continentales. Mais ici, nous sommes venus pour les eaux continentales, de l'eau douce. Parmi les défis à relever, il y en a plusieurs: la pollution, la communication, le suivi et l'évaluation de tous les projets qui concernent l'eau et la politique même de la politique nationale qui pose problème au niveau de la RDC. Jusque-là, nous n'avons pas encore la politique nationale de l'eau, mais nous avons seulement la loi relative à l'eau qu'on venait de lancer. Et en ça, il manque aussi les mesures d'application de la loi relative à l'eau. Et dès qu'on aura à présenter les mesures d'application relatives à l'eau, en ce moment-là, on saura prendre des taxes, redevances et des impôts qui concernent la pollution, les utilisateurs, etc. Donc c'est tout ce que je peux vous dire en ce qui concerne l'eau de la RDC. Je vous remercie.
Bom dia, chamo-me Natália Capingano, sou angolana, trabalho no Instituto Nacional de Recursos Hídricos do Ministério de Energia e Águas. Sou hidrogeóloga e nós temos um plano de monitorização de águas subterrâneas, que é o Plano Nacional da Água, e estamos a tentar implementar o plano de gestão de recursos hídricos subterrâneos com base na comunidade, através da SADC GMI, com um projeto que envolve Young Professionals.
Bonjour, je suis Ranto, je suis de Madagascar et je représente ici le ministère de l'eau, de l'assainissement et de l'hygiène. Actuellement, je suis le directeur régional du ministère de l'eau dans la région appelée Analamang. Ce que j'attends de cette formation, c'est que après cette formation, je peux avoir beaucoup d'idées pour implémenter des projets concrets sur la surveillance de la qualité de l'eau des rivières et aussi pour améliorer les projets pour protéger les rivières. Voilà. Et merci surtout pour l'organisation de la SADC Division eau. Merci.
My name is Jessica Moyo. I'm from Zambia. I work under the Ministry of Water Development, Sanitation and Environmental Protection. I'm under the Department of Water Resources Development, based in Chilanga District of Lusaka Province. And mainly our mandate as a department is to develop the water resources structures such as dams, weirs, and boreholes. And my expectation of this training is to learn more and to add to my knowledge and skills so that I can implement what I will learn here in my country, so that it should help improve the water sector for the future generations to come.
My name is Nontobeko Ngulunga. I am from South Africa. I work for the Department of Water and Sanitation. Okay, when I first got into water and sanitation, I was dealing with flood monitoring of the Orange River system for like 2 years, and then I moved to calibration of gauging structures. I worked there for maybe, I think it was 3 years. And then now I'm currently with data acquisition and management. So there, what I basically do is, there are people from the regions, they go and download data. Once they download the data at the gauging stations, then they come back to the office, load the data on the database. It's called Hystra. And then from there, they process the data, and then the data gets transmitted to head office. And then now I have to look at the data, make sure that the data does not have gaps, look at the abnormalities before I promote the data. If I see that the data is not okay, I have to fix it before I promote it to the DWS website. Okay, I'm here to learn and to share whatever knowledge that I have with regards to water monitoring and dissemination of the data.
My name is Sylvanus Unona. I'm actually from the Kuvelai Water Course Commission, a program manager. The Kuvelai Water Course Commission is a commission that was formed or established between the two member states, which is Angola and Namibia, for the better management of the Kuvelai Water Course River. And actually my expectation from this course is to come up with better tools for communicating river data to the stakeholders. Giving example, like the Kuvelai is one of the unique river systems in SADC, if I have to say so, because it's only 100 kilometer perennial, and the rest it's spread into the channel of networks, and it's prone to floods and droughts. And also we also have the groundwater system that is quite unique, that was discovered in recent years. And now from this course now, it's how we communicate such information to the stakeholders in terms of floods, and what even if the hydrologist or the expertise monitor floods and droughts, how do they communicate these scientific data to the farmers? How do they communicate these scientific data to the relevant authority in a way that is more understandable, that can make sense to the final recipients?
From the people who were introducing themselves, I could pick up a lot of monitoring, and not very sure if I heard somebody talk about monitoring wetlands, monitoring an estuary. I heard about groundwater, surface water. Perhaps you said it earlier or not?
I didn't hear. Anybody working on wetlands and estuaries? No. There we go.
There's my friend. Okay.
Great.
And Mozambique has got such beautiful estuaries. I think in terms of the estuarine plant species, it's like the most diverse species are in your place. And so these are very important aspects to monitor. When the floods come, this is our front line in terms of reducing that force of a storm. So monitoring and transponder was mentioned a lot, which says to me, Jim, we have enough ambassadors on the ground to look after our water. And if we do that within SADC, really, why can't we be proud that we have already met our SDG in Africa 2063 now? What stops us from saying that? We're sharing this information, we're sharing resources, we're sharing the basin, the catchments. Surely we have got enough water to meet our needs and the needs of many generations to come. I don't want to talk about how many rivers and whatever we have in SADC. It's more than enough. That I can tell you. There's reports from our organization that talk about water, transboundary water resources, and how much we have of that. And I think, really, we are the ambassadors back to our principles, as Jim said, to say, let's use our resources as Africa. Before you are South Africa, Mozambique, or whatever, you are African. And Africa is a continent that can be treated in unity. And that's what we'd like to see. That's why we have got Agenda 2063. It's all of us talking to our needs. And we can do that. It's in our hands, really. Same applies to the SDGs. And the reports that you'll be getting later and the discussions today, I'm sure, one way or another, you will talk to these high-level strategic aspirations, which cover all the reasons why you are doing the monitoring on the ground. And we have to do that monitoring very well. It is expensive, but here we are going to talk about the cheapest way of monitoring, getting the same results. That's fantastic because we don't have resources.
Access to clean drinking water becomes imperative if we are going to stave off the infectious diseases. And some of those diseases you're going to be very familiar with. Bilharzia, schistosomiasis, hepatitis, cholera. Those are big problems within the water sector and affect millions. Malaria is another one that we could add in there. Very closely linked to the management of flows within a river. If we look at water stress by country, currently, the way it's calculated is the ratio of withdrawals to supply. So if it's extremely high stress, it means there's way too much withdrawal compared to the supply. South Africa is currently the only SADC country that has a high water use stress, and that's because of our growing economy, the growing population. Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Madagascar, and Tanzania are medium stress, according to this. Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Zambia are currently under low stress levels. They've got good water resources. So East African countries tend to have more water than West African countries, at least down in the south in sub-Saharan Africa. However, year 2050, the projections look different. So what's shown here in colors is a percentage change in water availability compared to today. So if you're seeing orange, it means that there's 20% less water available by the year 2050. And now suddenly we see that there's a large portion of the SADC region that's going to have even less water available to it. So all southern African countries, according to this study, will experience a 20% reduction in water availability compared to today. This clearly highlights that we need careful planning and management of our water resources if we're going to be able to conserve effectively. And when we say conserve, we mean conserve not only the flows in a system, but also all the biota and the society that's linked to that river system. Within the SADC region, okay, the overall SADC goal around water is to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of people in the SADC region through promoting cooperation in all water matters in the region for sustainable and equitable development, proper usage and management of water resources. That's the SADC overall goal around water. Within the SADC region, and you can see the river basins shown there, you've got the Congo, you've got the Orange Senku system, you've got the Kaneni system, Okavango, Zambezi. We know that rainfall is highly variable over the SADC region. We know that in the western parts of the SADC region, you suddenly start to see a big gap in the number of rivers. And that's because a lot of the rivers are ephemeral. They only flow for a very short period of the year. So now we've got this added complexity of spatial and temporal scarcities here. So in time and space, water is differentially available within the SADC region. Because the rainfall is highly variable, water resources are unevenly distributed, and additionally, the water demand and water availability are not matched. In this graphic, the purple dots are all the dams that have been built to try and improve water security and provide it. Now, those dams have impacts of their own as well on those river systems. And obviously, there are now added risks for water resources. We know that widespread poverty, unemployment are adding to the issues here. And what we see is that most of these regions within SADC, the water is shared. These are shared water courses. So those of you that are familiar with Arasacom, Limcom, Zamcom, those commissions work to try and manage water in a transboundary context. Transboundary water courses, they span varying social, legal, and political approaches to water resources. So here, if we look year 2050, we can see 3 main basins here. Parts of Keneni, Okavango, Zambezi, Orange Senku Basin, Limpopo down in the south. The purple means that those water resources by the year 2050 are going to be under increased pressure, and we need to ensure close cooperation with our neighboring states if we're going to manage them. Okay, so that's the Okavango, the Keneni, and Zambezi. The pink system, these water resources are already approaching closure. What do we mean by closure? We mean that the water in those systems is already over-allocated. It's been allocated to agriculture, to farming. So we've got problems. We've got problems coming up. By the year 2050, there's going to be such a high demand for water, and already some systems are over-allocated. And what's the main problem? Well, it's humans. It's us. Water is essential to human well-being. Civilizations, cities, we've always built our cities around water because of the need of water. Water is essential for life on Earth, yet it's less than 1% of the total volume of water available. It's a basic natural resource. We cannot live without it. Rivers are our ecological infrastructure. Now, I want to talk a bit about this term, ecological infrastructure. How many of you have heard that term? Just put your hand up if you've heard of ecological infrastructure. No one. Okay, that's very interesting. So, the SADC Regional Strategic Action Plan refers to this term, and it's a wonderful term. It's a wonderful term in our sector. If you think about what the word infrastructure is, we think of built infrastructure. Okay, so built infrastructure would be a road, or a bridge, or a building. And if we use the analogy of a road here, a road transports somebody from A to B in an easy manner, and it provides a service. Now think of a river replacing the road. A river in an ecological landscape is also providing a service, and it's also critical infrastructure to animals, to plants, to nutrients, to everything else. So ecological infrastructure is the equivalent of built infrastructure, but in an ecological context. Okay, a river, yes, yeah. Jim, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so I really want to add to what Leah's saying, because this term was invented in Southern Africa, in the SADC region, and now the whole world is starting to show an interest in it. And what Leah's referring to is this document. Okay, so we now have the Regional Strategic Action Plan for the SADC region. Okay, it was developed over 2 years through a large public participation process in every SADC country. Okay? So we are orientating this training to the strategic plan because it takes us through to 2020. Okay? Now, the foundation of the policy work is ecological infrastructure. You don't have to worry too much about the complexity because this book is on your memory stick already, the one that Ayanda's going to give you on Friday. Okay?
And we've got presentations on this, specifically on the structure and on the framework that are coming. Yeah.
So I just want to tell you a quick story about why this is such an important word. Exactly a year ago, a friend of mine was invited to a forum in Pretoria. And at the forum, who should have been chairing the forum but the current president of South Africa, okay, Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa said to this forum, you know, I haven't a clue what ecological infrastructure means. What on earth does ecological infrastructure mean? Luckily, in the audience was a friend of Ayanda and I called Tandanani Luvuno, an isiZulu speaking guy, and he said, sir, I can explain. Now, this forum took place in the union buildings of Pretoria where government sits. Okay? Now, Tandanani had no idea that this man was to become the president of South Africa, but he thought, it's my duty to share the term as best I can. He said to everybody in the room, please stand up, and they all walked to the window of the union buildings, and they looked over the mountains of the Johannesburg, and he said to everyone, can you see those hills? They said yes. He said, you might think those hills are just hills ready to be developed. If you're wise, you would know those hills are a water factory. The wind blows against the hills, it rises, it creates rain, and that rain flows down to benefit all the people of Pretoria. That is ecological infrastructure.
Think of rivers as acting as these corridors in the landscape. The riparian zones, the areas where there's vegetation on the sides of a river, those are your buffers. Those buffers are critical because they filter and sort all the pollution, the diffuse pollution that's about to enter a river. So those riparian zones, those buffers are so important. When you see a landscape where farming has taken place right up to the banks of a river, you won't see buffers, and you'll see the impacts of pollution, of sediment, and of everything else on those rivers. So this is the ecological infrastructure that we must work to protect, that we must work to manage. Because it's one thing just saying everything is protected, you can't touch it, you can't develop. But we know that as scientists, as ecologists, as people in the water sector, development has to take place. There are many people that are reliant on water, so we have to reach a balance. There's going to be a balance of resource use and resource protection. The definition that I have here says the naturally functioning ecosystems, this is now for ecological infrastructure, so the definition of ecological infrastructure, naturally functioning ecosystems that produce and deliver services that are of value to society, fresh water, climate regulation, soil formation, disaster risk reduction. Ecological infrastructure is the nature-based equivalent of built infrastructure. It's equally important for providing services underpinning socio-economic development. So we will refer to this term again and again throughout the workshop, and we hope that when you go home, as Jim says, you're going to take that word, or those two words with you, ecological infrastructure, and start applying that in your reports, in your thinking. Excellent. Now, obviously, there are numerous benefits from streams and rivers, and these values become significantly greater when we consider all the associated ecosystems that they're connected to. So if you're thinking of a river, you have to think about the floodplain. That floodplain is critical land for agriculture, for flood amelioration. We can think about those riparian zones acting as buffers, and about the birds and the animals that need to use those corridors to get from point A to point B through a landscape. Now, not all of these benefits and services can easily be evaluated. It's actually very difficult. The economists, they are the environmental economists. And that's where the figure that I mentioned earlier, 26.4 billion, it comes from an environmental economist who tries to put a value onto what these things are doing. One way that you could do that is to say, this is a wetland. It has an amount of water coming into it. That water is polluted, and we know by how much. We've got the water quality tests show us that there's a level of nutrients or phosphates in that water. If we had to now go and treat that in a plant, in a reverse osmosis plant, say, to remove those constituents, there will be a price tag associated with that. It might be 5-6 rand a litre that you would need to spend to treat that water. But a wetland is doing it for you for free. And you can measure exactly how efficient it is if you put your sampling point at the downstream exit of that wetland. That's how we start to put values onto ecological infrastructure. So we have to use methods that are available to us, sampling, getting it tested in the lab, seeing how much it would cost to treat, and then we start to get a value. Now, human well-being, we don't get this benefit to human well-being directly from natural capital all the time. But there are a number of ecosystem services that are provided to us from our freshwater systems and from our natural systems. And there's an interaction there that's happening between social capital, human capital, and built capital. All of that affects us directly. Some of the benefits that we know of, that we derive from good, healthy, functioning ecosystems, they can be split into 4 categories. Provisioning services, regulating services, cultural services, and supporting services. Now, that cultural services, it might be very difficult to put a value on those. Would you agree? I mean, that's a very difficult thing to place value on. Yet, the waterfalls in Zambia, Kalangwishi, those are amazing sites, and those are sites of spiritual value, that people want those sites to be healthy. So how do you put a value on that? It's a human perception, and it's a strong belief system. So you can see the difficulties we have in kind of putting a value on the cultural services that freshwater systems provide. Then there's also supporting services, things like nutrient cycling, soil formation, primary production. Primary production is algal growth. It's the base of the food chain. If you lose the base of the food chain, the rest of the food chain collapses. You need the biodiversity, you need the different types of habitat to provide homes and niches for all the aquatic organisms and other organisms, secondary, tertiary, higher order organisms. Provisioning, of course, we know rivers provide us with food in the case of fish, fresh water for drinking, washing, domestic use, wood and fiber from all the riparian zones, and for forestry, fuel, even energy could be added on there, hydroelectric. Regulating, okay, now we're starting to touch on things like water purification, which I've mentioned, the role that wetlands play in filtration. Climate regulation, so that would be the flood amelioration. In Lesotho, it's how do you tackle the loss of topsoil? Well, if you've got good, healthy, intact grasslands in your upper catchment, you won't be losing topsoil. So you start to curb the problems around sediment. I'm not saying that's easy to do, because people need grazing lands, so it's a very difficult thing to do. Disease regulation, carbon storage. These are all the different services that we derive. Now, although the importance of we are going to be generating a report from this workshop, which would basically summarize and capture all of the discussion that we've had here, all of the topics that have been covered. And then what we plan on doing is using a Canvas system, keeping in touch with all the delegates to find out what they're doing with all of this information once they're back in their countries. So the idea is that we set up a way of communication, a forum, whether that would be a WhatsApp group, an email chain. We want to hear back from all the participants once they're back in their countries as to what they are doing, what they are implementing, and what they are applying based on what they've learned in the workshop. And what we hope to see is that the basic principles of river monitoring are now applied in these other SADC countries. The EU and South Africa are fairly well aligned in terms of the basic principles of ecostatus monitoring or ecosystem monitoring. Slight shift away from using indicator species only now to a more holistic approach of looking at the entire ecosystem. And so that's one of the key elements that comes out of this workshop is really explaining that. What are the key elements? How do they interact? And how you would go about reporting. What frequency would you need to do your monitoring? So those are the elements that we'll cover. And ideally what we'll see down the line is that each country has got a good river status monitoring program implemented. So South Africa has the River Ecostatus Monitoring Program in place, which has now been modified to include a range of tools that cover the vegetation, the habitat, the biota, the fish, and the invertebrates as well as the physicochemical constituents. And what we'd love to see is that same model, the basic principle, now being applied in other countries and on a frequent scale. So with some of the larger transboundary basins, we see that surveys happen every 5 years. That would be a wonderful thing to see that taking place now in the other river commissions as well, ZAMCOM, LIMCOM, and they've recently formed as a wonderful enthusiasm, and Arasacom has taken a bit of a lead in that sense, and has started applying these joint basin surveys, which are very wide, basically looking at the entire basin from source to sea, getting good baseline information and then monitoring every 5 years to see what changes have taken place. But critically, it's what happens in between those 5 years. It's all about the implementation. We can monitor these systems and we can watch their demise, or we can take action and we can actually start to implement measures to improve them. And I think that's a critical thing which we would like to instill in all the delegates, is that monitoring is one piece of the puzzle, but it's also the doing, it's also the taking action.
Do you remember your numbers? Yes. Okay, if you've got number 1, put your hand up. Number 1. I'm number 1 as well. Number 1 is all the people with Trevor doing hydraulics. Number 2. 4 people. 5, 6. That's a better group. 1, 2, 3. Number 4. Now that's Via's group, so number 4 are all ready. And you're going to be doing clarity. So with Via's group, we're going to be doing clarity tube and turbidity. Okay, that's number 4. For 15 minutes only, and then swap. And so the whole point of the field work is really to try and let the river tell us the story of the river. That is another way of describing monitoring, letting the river tell its story. And the river can't speak English or Zulu or French or Portuguese, but the river's features can tell us a story only if we know how to read them. And reading them, we need tools. So on the bus, you'll notice we've got nets for catching, for biomonitoring. We've got a clarity tube for measuring turbidity, and we've got a velocity plank for measuring the hydraulics of that river. So those tools enable us to read the river. And then what that's going to tell us is that a healthy river cleans itself better than a polluted river. So rivers are able to clean themselves naturally, but if we disrupt them and we put pollutants on them, they can't clean themselves as well as a healthy river. So can you see how this is happening? The river's going to tell us the story. We're going to read it using these tools. We're going to get that story and then understand how we could do it with other rivers. And remember, although this is citizen science, it's also communication, and it's engaging people in understanding rivers, especially people who haven't had a chance, like most of you, to study rivers at university or wherever you've studied. So members of the public can now participate in river health monitoring.
And so you would hold it down into the stream. Make sure you keep it at a bit of an angle and the bubbles come out. Then underwater you put the bung on again. Now you pull the tube out, it's full of water. And what happens is, this is a very clever little, this is like the Seki disc. You remember that Seki disc, yes, that thing that I drew for you? Yeah, exactly. So you'd fill it with water. And then what you've got to do is look where the sun is. Okay, the sun is there. And you want to be perpendicular to the sun. Okay, you want the sun's light to hit this tube at perpendicular angle, okay, 90 degrees. Then you would hold it up and you start looking through the tube. You're looking at this, you're looking at that little black thing. And we start to move it away from ourselves, away from our eyes, okay? And we keep moving it. We keep watching, and eventually there'll be a point at which we don't see it anymore, which we can't quite clearly make it out. And we just pull it backwards and forwards until we're sure we can't see it, then we have a look where we are and we see, okay, we had 63 centimeters. That's how much light is penetrating through this 1 meter of water. So it's the same as giving us some indication of the total suspended solids. And that's the use of this. Now what we've done is we've calibrated the centimeters to a TSS reading, total suspended solids, and we're also working to get that to an NTU reading,
so
the total turbidity reading.
The calibration is in terms of what units?
So it's converting these centimeters back to TSS, which is milligrams per liter. Yeah. And the NTUs, that's a set scale of, I think it's like 0 to 100.
Okay.
Yeah. And that would be a single.
Ladies and gents, this is our site, our sampling site. We're going to be doing mini SADC here, right? So, as I said before, your sampling site doesn't have to be a single point. It can be a whole stretch, starting from, in this case, it will start from there to about there. Because ideally you want to get all your biotopes, the different types of habitats in your sampling spot, right? So for mini SADC, you're going to need loose stones like these. Stones like these, stones that you can move, right? That you can dislodge with your hand, with your hands if you want, or you can use your feet to actually dislodge them and rub them against each other. You need vegetation that's in water. It could be in flowing water, it could be in still water, right? I mean, the velocity could be fast, it could be slow. So that's why we divide them into vegetation in current and vegetation out of current. But for this exercise, that doesn't really matter, right? So I'm going to show you now the protocol, and you also need sand, right? Sand, and if it was mud, we need mud. But in the stream, there's no mud, right? There's no mud. So the first thing that you're going to need is to get do things the right way. So you want to stand upstream of the net. That means if your river is flowing down, you want to stand at the top and then put your net down, right? And then you start dislodging stones using your feet, right? And you have to be slowly and careful so that you don't slip and fall in, and be washed down stream. So you want to put your net down like that, and you want to spend 5 minutes doing that. Right? You can start anywhere, but I personally prefer that you start from where the water is flowing the slowest to where the water is flowing really fast, right? Because, I mean, if you start where the water is flowing fast and then you go to where the water is slow, you might lose some of the things here. They might swim out of your net while you're trying to do that. But if the current is strong enough, it's going to keep them in there if you started with the slow ones. You know what I mean? So, yeah, this is how you do it. You put your net down like this, and then you start timing yourself, and then you start kicking your stones, right? And you want to put your net to capture all the plume that's coming out, that's the dirt that is being lifted up. You want to put your net there, because that's basically where your organisms are going. You have to be vigorous. But I'm not wearing any shoes now. So, and then you do this, and then you stop your time, right? You stop your time before you speak, right? And you might want to do this a little bit, just to make sure that you've got a clean net, right? And then you move across to a different biotope like this, and you want to start down, up. You don't want to start at the top, down, right? And then you want to put your net like this, right? It's a little bit tilted, but you put it under. And then you sort of do push, and then up, and then drag, pull. Push, up, and then sort of like this. And then you move like that. So that should be enough to dislodge them from their hiding places. And remember, these things are very adapted to, some of them are very adapted to fast flowing water, so they can cling really, really well there. and then you move on to your mud. Right? We're gonna assume this is our mud. So basically you push it down like this, and then you start timing yourself, and then you sort of stir them a little bit. The net mud, you shouldn't put the net all the way down so that you scoop the mud out, because you don't want a very dirty sample. A very dirty sample, because it's going to spend more time trying to clean it, and then another time identifying the fence, right? So, and you want to get different types of flow, right? I'd say this is a different type because you've got water breaking on the surface, the ripples, and you want to get the run, water like that, then that would be a run because there's no bubbles on the surface. So basically, you move on, you do that just the way I showed you here. You keep going. So you're only timing, remember that you're only timing the sampling effort and not moving around up and down. So once you stop doing your dislodging, you just pause the time, and then move on to another place. So you want to get as much variety as possible. So that's the whole idea. You want to now, you start like this, you time yourself, and then you sort of like that. So when something's vegetating, put it down there, just like that, and immediately you can see some things coming out of there. Those red things here. Those are baby flies, baby midges. They're called chironomids. See, they've got that the red as much time as you need trying to identify these. There's no set time for it.
You need to use bare hands?
Depending on how dirty is your water, you might want to put gloves if you want. You don't really have to touch the water. You might want to use pipettes like that.
Some of those worms will end up in your finger.
Yes. So you can stir it like this, just stir it like that. So basically, remember that we are scoring these things based on their tolerances. Chironomids are known to be quite hardy organisms. They can tolerate pollution, organic pollution, and that's why they've got this mechanism that this hemoglobin in their blood to sort of suck in more oxygen as possible, right? So basically each one of them has got a score here that is allocated next to it. So you just look for something there. If you see it, you circle it on here. You circle each one that you see. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stand on that side. So that's a bit more light. Okay. Can you see it? Sweet.
So what are you seeing, guys?
No.
What do you see with your microscope?
This is the head.
Yeah, there's something projecting in the phone.
Yeah, check it.
Underneath.
You check again.
And behind.
Yeah.
Behind is the tail.
Behind the tail.
So have you all seen it? That thing that's sticking out just below the head. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Have you all seen it?
Yes.
So that thing that's sticking out there is called a proleg. A proleg basically means a primitive leg. So it's not a well-developed lake, it's very primitive. So we can't really call it a lake. That's why we call it a pro lake. So now, do we say this doesn't have legs again? Are we still saying it doesn't have legs?
It has.
It has a leg. Yes. Sweet. So let's go back to our dichotomous key. So we're eliminating that now, right?
Yeah.
So we here, it's got legs. So is it clearly defined, or is it just short, stubby legs? Basically what we're doing here, we're assessing the health of the river using macroinvertebrates. We call that biomonitoring of macroinvertebrates. So the tool that we're using is called mini-SAS.
Oh.
So it's the mini stream assessment scoring system. This is a simplified version of the South African scoring system, version 5, which is a more sciencey tool. This one is more simplified. So we're using this tool to assess the health of this river. So what we found here now was an invertebrate, a true fly, which scored a 2, and there was nothing else that was in there. And that tells us that it's not good. It's not good at all. It's dominated by one type of organism, and it scores a very, very low score. If it scores a 2 out of 17, then that's not good.
We got from our assessment, we can further go on to either have the water chemically tested, so that we find out what is causing pollution to the stream. Because from the result we can say that the stream is not healthy because of the true flies that were found in the stream.
All right, thank you.
Which in addition they are tolerant to some sort of pollution. So it's an indication that there could be pollution of some sort.
Got a very simple tool to show you here today. This is the clarity tube. As you can see, it's a perspex tube, and it's got all the graduations here in centimeters from 0 to 100, so it's 1 meter. And the tube is essentially a measure of total suspended solids, okay, or NTUs. You can do some conversions between the amount of centimeters, between TSS, then and NTUs. Now, I explained the SADC disc idea in the lectures. You remember those? Yes. And I drew the picture of the disc that had a patch of white. It was split into quarters, black and white. Now that would be if you came to a lake and you wanted to see how much light was penetrating through the water, say, and at the end of the rope you'd have this heavy metal disc with the same shape on it, and the quarters black and white. And you'd slowly lower the SADC disc into the water, into the lake. And you'd be watching to see when that disc starts to fade out of sight, when you actually can't clearly make out the divisions between black and white. So you keep lowering it in, and eventually at the point at which you cannot make out that disc anymore, you have a look at your rope and you see what distance you're at. Perhaps you're at 3.5 meters, and you say, right, that is the amount of light penetration into this water, is 3.5 meters. That concept has been turned into a horizontal tube, where you essentially look through a meter of water. So the clarity tube is a very simple tool that does exactly the same thing as a SADC disc. In this case, the actual disc is this little black thing here that we move. And this is simple, it's fish magnets. You know when you clean a fish tank, you got a magnet on both sides. That's all that is, it's a magnet. And what happens is you start to move this through your water, and you're busy looking through here, and eventually that disc will fade out of sight and you won't see it. And then you have a look at where it sits here on the centimeters, and you say, right, that's the distance that I can see through here. Now, a couple of important things is that you need to record the kind of weather conditions. If it's a cloudy day, you might be seeing very different things. If you got really bad eyesight, then you want at least 1 or 2 other people to do a reading with you. Okay, but on the whole, eyesight isn't too much of an issue, and even if you've got reading glasses, you can still look through with reading glasses or whatever it is that you need. What we don't want to do is we don't want to look with your sunglasses on, So if they're on your face, we don't want to do that, because then polarized light might affect this reading. If you want to look where your shadow is, and you want this tube to be perpendicular to your shadow, i.e. perpendicular to sunlight. So when we look now, we're going to fill this tube up, and we're going to look at it like this, like I'm doing now. You don't have to hold it right up against your eye, you can if you want to, but you're really just looking through to see if you can see that disc. Right, so let's fill it up, and we're going to let each of you have a look and see what your reading is. Then we'll take the average and we'll say that's what the clarity is to your sight. And it's quite logical as well. I mean, we're looking at the site now. The water looks very clear, doesn't it? You can see right through. But we can't see pools that are deeper than a meter, so let's check. Let's go and get our water reading. Maybe you can come around and join me here on this rock. You can do it. Good stuff. Right, so when we're filling up, it's important that we don't get air bubbles in the tube. If we get air bubbles, then it's going to distort your view. So what you want to do is you want to dip it into the water and make sure all the air bubbles get out of that tube. There's quite a lot of air bubbles in there. Right. When the air bubbles are out, put the stopper on under the water. And that way you'll have 1 meter of water and you won't have any air bubbles in there that are going to distort your view. Okay, then what do? We look at the sun, check where we are. Okay, we want to be perpendicular. I'll bring this little thing back. I'll start from the beginning here. Okay, you can all see it there. Hey, you see the black disc? Good. I'm going to start moving it. And I'm going to keep an eye on it. Now the problem is I've got short arms. So I have to keep going here. Okay, I'm going to keep moving it. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the outline of that disc. When I can't see the outline of that disc, then I'm not happy. Or at least then I know that I can stop. So I'm going to keep going. You can still see it. Starting to fade now, it's quite difficult to see. If I go beyond, I lose it there. I'll bring it back a little bit. You can still see it there. So I'm sitting about here. I'm sitting between 89, 90, somewhere around there. Now each of you can go. And you can do the same thing and have a look and see where you start to lose sight, the outline of this. Okay.
All right.
Okay, this is an instrument commonly known as the plank. We use it to measure velocities in water, and we can measure depth as well. The way we do it is we put the plank in the water at right angles. We measure the depth of the water on the upstream side. So here I'm reading 23 centimeters. On the downstream side I'm measuring 19, so we've got 4 centimeter height difference. Looking at our table, we can see a 4 centimeter height difference is going to give us a velocity of 0.65. So very easily we can work out what are your velocities on a very simple method and a simple instrument to use. You can also use this to measure discharge as well, and that's using the velocity area method, and simply with a cross section and velocities you can work out discharge of your river as well.
All right.
Okay.
But you also look at I'm looking at the soil profile.
I want you to observe the alien vegetation. But it will tricky sometimes for you because maybe possible that's what is alien veg in South Africa is indigenous in your area. So we are looking at the reference zone, okay, but you can look wherever you want to look. And also we look for rubbish, any waste material that is around the river. We look for, there's anything that you can see that is changing the flow of the river. That's why we're going by the bridge. And we look for anything that is changing the channel, like alteration. of the flow. My session is about the riparian healthy audit. So it's assessing the riparian zone. This is the simplest tool, riparian zone, riparian healthy audit. It's a simple form of IHI, which is integrated habitat index. So you're just looking at the alien veg along the riparian zone and the flow modification, channel modification, vegetation removal. So you physiochemical, like there's any chemical in the river, those kind of stuff. So we can make it like a combination of all the assessments together. Then we can conclude with the river condition.
All right, what tools are you using?
It's a riparian head audit tool. So it doesn't have like sort of an equipment. It's a pamphlet that has been derived from the scientific method called the IHI.
So what we've done here is come to this river, the Klipprivier or Stone River. We've come here with a group of SADC people, 2 people from each of 13 countries, to try out citizen science tools as a way of understanding how the river systems here work. So for example, we've done mini SAS using this reference sheet, which is a very basic version of the SAS system. We've got this clarity tube for measuring turbidity and how dirty is the river, and the whole idea was to give everyone a chance to really touch the water and find out about how these ecosystems work, how they fit together. We also did a river health assessment looking at the riverine vegetation, and then the final one was using hydraulics and a clarity tube with Trev Park to look at how do you investigate the hydraulics of rivers. Earlier on, Bayanda looked at mini SAS. Ayanda, his colleague, was also doing the riverine health assessment, and then Via was doing also tests with the water and checking it out with the clarity tube, and so it goes on. So a really exciting afternoon at the Stone River here in the middle of Johannesburg, really appreciating rivers and how the river health is good for people. We have a saying, healthy rivers mean healthy people. Thank you.
But how was the health of the river in general?
While we were here, we saw a pastor, Umfundisi, coming to collect water, which he uses as a cleansing ceremony with his congregation. Now, isn't that fantastic? But if that river water is not clean, then his congregation could get sick. So there's an example of where the spiritual value of rivers is compromised if we pollute them and litter them and allow too much nutrients to get into those rivers. And we say from citizen science, if you tell people, maybe they forget. But if you study with people and engage with them, then they change forever. So that's how this study has been done. Everyone had a chance to actually do a little bit of citizen science at the stream.